Hi everybody and welcome to the third session of the first day of Digital Outcomes. I'm Helen Mackenzie and I'm delighted to be joined for this session, which is about running successful pilots with procurement tech startups with a couple of really experienced digital procurement people and a very, very exciting practitioner from the field. So I've got with me today Matthias Gutzmann, who's the founder of Digital Procurement World, and Herman Knevel, who's also a co-founder of DPW Labs. So that's part of DPW and the part that's working with the startups. And from the field, we're delighted to have Nufried Pierre-Louis, who's the Director of Procurement, Digitisation and Strategy at Johnson & Johnson. So fantastic wealth of experience today. So welcome to you all to the session today. Okay, before we start, I'd like to remind everybody that you can ask questions on this session. It's in the box below the live stream, and we love to get questions as we go along, and I can ask them to the panel as we get them in. So I think just to as a start, let's just introduce ourselves so people will know who we are. So let's start with you, Matthias. Tell us just a little bit about you to give our audience a feel for who you are if they've not come across you before.
Can't imagine that, but for those who haven't heard about me, no, I was just being funny. I'm Matthias Gutzmann. I'm the founder of DPW, Digital Procurement World. Founded DPW 2019, really with the mission to help organizations transform digitally. I run the most startup-centric conference in procurement supply chain today, happening in Amsterdam once a year. We're launching in North America next year, by the way. Yeah, really here to chat and talk about our amazing experience with Johnson & Johnson. And thanks again, Helen, for the invitation.
That's great. What about you, Herman? You got the pleasure of working with celebrity Matthias then. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
It was on my bucket list, so there's a tick in the box working with Matthias. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for the invitation as well. My name is Herman, based in Amsterdam, co-founder of DPW Labs. And indeed, I work with Matthias and our team since, I believe, 2020, summer 2020, basically helping organizations to make innovation happen. So the conference and the ecosystem is a lot about talking about all the innovation that's happening, all the startups and the mature companies that are, accelerating innovation, but we make it really tangible and help procurement organizations to thrive and to accelerate, not only for the results and the data, for example, but also culture, ways of working, agile. That's where we help. And so things come together here.
Fantastic. And last but by no means least, Nufried, tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you do at Johnson & Johnson.
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation to share my experiences so far working with the team on how do we bring innovation to Johnson & Johnson. As part of my role as heading the digitization and strategy group, I own the digital strategy for procurement at Johnson & Johnson and the associated roadmap. So when we're looking at how do we continue to make steep changes in our digitization transformation, we're also looking at areas where we can leverage niche companies that are filling current gaps within the capability spaces within our roadmap, and how we can pilot and test out to see if these areas would be able to solve some of the current challenges that our business partners are facing, so that we can continue to build out that best-in-class procurement function while also achieving the business outcomes that we're expected to drive on behalf of our partners.
Excellent. And we'll hear a bit more about that a bit later in the session. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay. Right, Matthias, there's been a real explosion in startups in the procurement space, haven't there? Which is fantastic. It means there's a lot of innovation around. What opportunities and what challenges has that created, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting times to be in procurement, I think. And when I launched DPW 2019, I mean, startups were already there, right? I mean, we had, Teal Books out there, we had Scott RFP, but I think what has happened since in those 3 years has been, an explosion of startups. It's been almost overwhelming, looking at the number of startups that are coming through. Now, clearly, there's probably a lack of the suite providers in terms of, them probably, not being able to meet some of the customer needs and innovate as fast as those needs were kind of, growing. But it's a lot of new startups are coming through, a lot of new categories as well. There are domains they are focusing on with their new technologies. Of course, we have a lot of startups still addressing, those old issues from 20 years ago, spend visibility, compliance, etc. But we also have startups now, tackling challenges maybe that couldn't have been tackled so well, beforehand. Think of tail spend. We have solutions coming through tackling that. We have more solutions coming through tackling sustainability, diversity, supplier collaboration, innovation. So so there's this overwhelming amount of startups coming through, and on the other side, or simultaneously, we also see more and more VC investor money also pouring into procurement and supply chain startups. I just looked at today before the session at PitchBook, which is one of our technology insight partners. And in 2021, 60 billion USD, were invested into supply chain and procurement technologies. That's like around, I think, 1,500 deals only in that year. It took a little bit of a dip last year, but it's overall, if you look at the last 10 years, the amount of money being poured into those startups is a lot, I believe. And then, again, what I said, there are new categories coming through. And, I think, more and more, you have companies like Zip or Oralabs focusing on, not on the S2P part, but also on the experience layer part, the intake process, right? Making sure we can, we are focusing on the user experience and making sure we can, the business, has an easy way to use all the solutions. So but no, exciting space, right? And it's not, in my opinion, about either or, right? Either using a suite or a point solution is like also today is like we're living in this ecosystem, I guess, of various players. How can we bring both together? How can we bring the startups into our current tech stack and marry that and connect this with what's already inside the company, and connect this with a stable core, right? So exciting space, and I'm so happy to be part of the journey.
And do you think, I was talking to somebody, it was actually an entrepreneur in the procure tech space, and I thought there was a lot of providers about, a lot of startups, a lot of companies. He didn't think we were quite at the stage that perhaps sales are yet, with the volume of options that are out there for people. Do you think we've still got a bit to go in terms of the numbers that we can see out there? Can we see an even bigger ecosystem for people to choose from, or are we getting to the point where perhaps the market is starting to sort of work out who's going to survive and thrive, and who's perhaps going to?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think traditionally, probably, maybe it's functions like sales, marketing, they've been maybe a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of, the amount of solutions that came through, and even those functions. I can't really, talk about that too much because I don't have the insights, but maybe they've been on a digital trajectory or transformation a little bit earlier than procurement. Procurement typically lagging a little bit behind other functions, but I don't know that. In terms of the number of startups, could be that there is maybe a smaller number of startups, but I think what counts is the number of new startups coming through, and that is going exponentially up, I feel. And that's exciting to see. But also, some of the startups that we've seen in 2019, some of them are not there anymore. So they're, some of them have been bought by the big players. So there seems to be a consolidation in the market. And some of the new startups as well, we see some of the point solutions adding actually more and more features and modules to their initial solution that they created. Seems like they are turning into suite providers themselves now, right? So maybe we are moving into the cycle. But in terms of comparing that with other functions, I don't know. But what I see more and more is the importance of procurement and supply chain as a function. I mean, you just switch on the TV every day, and I feel it's inflation, supply chain. I mean, that's sustainability issues there. I mean, a lot of the problems, right, that a lot of companies face today, I think a lot of the problems can be solved by procurement and supply chain in the future today as well. But I think it's just we're just at the beginning of that growth, and because it becomes a more strategic function within enterprises. And there are going to be more solutions coming through as well, right? And especially now, I mean, now we need solutions clawing back inflation, right? So
yeah,
there are new value propositions coming through as more problems evolve in the real world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's really interesting to hear about that, and ecosystems perhaps creating themselves with this consolidation. And interesting you say about supply chain, because my understanding is that that it was mentioned in the State of the Union address this year over in the US, and that was something that perhaps not happened before. So let's get in a little bit then to we're hearing there's a lot out there, right? How do we get that and make it happen? And let's think about this 100-day pilot methodology that you've got. And a question either to you, Matthias, or perhaps to Herman. I think you've got this 100-day method. Why 100 days? What's the methodology behind that? Who'd like to answer that one for me? Herman, perhaps?
Yeah, I can answer that call, of course. Well, basically, the 100 days, that's the methodology, as you say. And we brought it in based on our experience and what we saw in the market when we saw corporates and startups running collaborations or running POCs, or even inside corporates, POCs being run, or pilots, whatever you call it. But we noticed that on one hand, the amount of pilots that were run in the organization, there were a lot, many times. Also, the time and the duration and the time spent and the budget spent and the resources spent on those pilots were staggering, you could say. So we thought, okay, how can we help by applying a methodology, as you said, which we call the 100 days, on those pilots, which is basically we help them to start and to end. And if you look at a start and an end, and when we say, okay, we have a definition of the problem or a definition of the challenge statement, and we start a collaboration, let's say between a corporate and a pilot, because between a corporate and a startup, because we're talking about the ecosystem connection today. When we help those organizations to focus on, hey, this is the collaboration, this is what we're looking for, this is the way we work together. So it's not only on innovation and then problem solution fit, it's also about cultural fit between a larger company and a smaller company, and also between the teams. What do we expect from each other? What's the value case? What we're looking for? But basically, you could say, you can try and error, you can run a data set, you can find, 100% maybe. That's an option. But you can also say, let's try to focus on what we really need to know. And if you focus on what you really need to know and have some early value or early proof points of the potential fit or of the innovation power of, in this case, a startup, you can run it easily in 100 days. And it's not necessarily that you need 100 days to run it. You can spend time on the collaboration shaping, on running the pilot or a data set, and also to take time to conclude and to celebrate even all the learnings and the successes you engage with, and then even make a decision together whether you're going to kill or scale to move further on. So it's a handhold 100 days methodology, and it proves and it proves to work and bring a lot of value. And especially when organizations have pilots running for months, with too many people in the room and too many opinions as well. So it's also a structured methodology that's proven successfully, and that's what we apply through the Labs program when we encounter the corporate startup collaborations.
Kill or skill, that sounds a bit
Well,
let's get into the nitty gritty. I
yeah,
think
you need to make firm decisions on the spot.
yes.
Is there the potential or not? And we don't need to plan meetings and another meetings and another steerco, etc. Because then the decision-making process is another 3 months. So we say we need to make the decision in those 100 days. Do we continue or not? Because the proof is already on the table. Maybe not at the scale of the wider potential of the organization, but it's enough to prove to take a next step or to make at least a decision.
Right, Nufreed, kill or skill. Here we go. So sounds like quite an exciting experience. And how did you make the decision to do this type of project? And you called it a procurement garage, which sounds a little bit like Cupertino and Wozniak, but very exciting. But how did you make the decision to start? Because it sounds like it's quite a focused piece of work.
Right. So we recently refreshed our procurement strategy and also the digital strategy back in 2020. And it takes us through the next phase of our digitization journey through 2025. And when we were looking at the capabilities across our roadmap, we recognized, the ways that we were running pilots and how we were trying to assess whether a solution could help us took too long. Like sometimes it could take a year, for us to kind of run through a pilot and then make a decision on what we wanted to go forward with or maybe not go forward with. And you've kind of exhausted all that time trying to make a decision rather than delivering value for our business. And our business partners, their businesses are very dynamic. They need to be able to also, have partners that are agile, that are able to support them in a more agile way. So then when I was looking at how do we move this further quicker, I got the task of leading the procurement garage. And, one key point that was made is, remember, it's a garage, so it needs to come in and out. Like in a car, you want your car to come in and out within a specific time frame. You don't want to leave your car indefinitely in the garage and just kind of wait for, the repairs to get done. So, taking that mode of thinking and how do we inject more agile ways of piloting. I came across Matthias and Herman through Eloise Epstein from Kearney, and they had helped us to kind of shape an initial thinking of how could this work? How could we go forth doing this, and how could we reduce the time it took for us to execute the pilots that we wanted to execute, and how do we focus on the critical few? So, we engaged in a partnership last year where we not only built out the framework, but then we started to test it out very quickly. And what we saw and learned was how much of it, surprisingly, is not necessarily what you're testing with the companies that you partner with, but that ways of working to be able to accelerate and move things along. And what was helpful is that with the expertise from DPW Labs, we were able to tap into their network of companies that were doing, great work in the procurement tech space. We had a set of capability areas across our taxonomy that we said, hey, we just want to try to see if we can make some movement in these areas. Who are the players that we could work with? And, we kicked it off there. And I would say, there were no two pilots that were the same. There were definitely learnings that we gained from each of the pilots that we executed, but we stuck through, as hard as it was in some cases, completing the pilots in 100 days and making that decision at the end of the 100 days. And what we saw was, one, extreme laser focus on what was important for our business partners. So we weren't boiling the ocean. We wanted to focus on the few capabilities that would really drive proof points, as Herman had mentioned, on what would potentially be successful. Two, we also saw a change in the expectations of our leadership, right? Because they were used to us conducting pilots that would take a year, 6 months, didn't question it. Now that they saw that it was possible to do it in less time, we started to get more of an appetite where else can we apply this, And then 3, it also helped unravel some areas within our own procurement processes that we needed to adjust so that we can be more agile. If contracting takes 6 months, it doesn't really bode well for us being able to conduct a 100-day pilot. So where there were changes that we needed to make internally also in order to support that. So working with the team, I think we learned a lot, and then continue to evolve, and also ourselves lean into this way of working to deliver on those capabilities.
Yeah, and we've got a really good question that's come in from the audience about stakeholders being too busy, and how you get buy-in from procurement, buyers, and suppliers when starting your new tech pilot. I mean, you sort of answered that to a certain extent, Nufrid, in terms of that you were good, people saw you were good, and they wanted to get involved. But
Right.
I flashed that and flashed out. I'll put it back up again. There you go. Sorry about that. How did you get buy-in then? Perhaps was it because of your success, and then perhaps once you've had a go, I'd perhaps ask Herman to come in with some wider experience about getting buy-in.
I would say it's a little bit of both. Like we had great leadership support from the beginning at the whole concept of the procurement garage, and they were brought along the journey in regards to what areas we thought we wanted to play in, and what we would hope to come back with. And then a midpoint within our pilots, we actually had our whole team, the DPW Labs team, our challenge owners and sponsors, all on a call together just to kind of see, okay, this is what we're seeing so far. So that already kind of started to get them excited about, oh, I can't wait until, after, another 50 days, what you guys come back with and what the recommendations were. And one of the things that we were able to also establish at the beginning for most of the pilots that we conducted is that it does take commitment. So we can't necessarily, sign up to do a procurement garage pilot and the challenge owner only has capacity for about 10%. There is a level of dedication and commitment that needs to be agreed upon in the beginning, because at the end of the day, they're the ones closest to the problem. And we also need to make sure that we get that same level of commitment from either the suppliers or the business owners that are going to be involved in the pilot. So there was a bit of making sure that we had all the key stakeholders involved, and then taking our leadership along with us in the journey, kind of continue to gain their support on the viability of this model, really not only within procurement, but then also how can we expand it even broader.
Okay, let's bring you in now, Herman. What have you seen? Is that a similar experience to other companies that you've worked with in terms of
Yes.
experience? Yeah.
Yes, and we emphasize indeed on what Nufrid said, is that the commitment is super important. So commitment in this case was on the broader level as well, the procurement garage, but specifically to the question and to the pilot, we need commitment upfront before we start something, and that's both on the corporate side as well on the startup side. So it's the commitment upfront, also to manage expectations and also to meet expectations. So when we talk about agility and 100-day pilots and running an exciting and energy-driven pilot, then, for example, we can't bring in an MSA at day one to a startup from a corporate perspective, for example. It's about swift onboarding. It's about managing the expectations. It's about the alignment on both ends between those two parties. It's super important. But the commitment, managing the expectations, that is what I would like to add. And along the way, and all the experience we have so far that we gathered with J&J, but also with other companies, that's where we, of course, can advise and help those collaborations, and also to have the startups really excited. We've met with startups many times when after the 100 days, they were not successful in continuing a journey, but they said, we learned so much in so short time frame already. That was already a win for a startup as well, because a startup doesn't have the bandwidth or the money or the budget or the people to have a 9 months or 1 year trajectory in place. So the speed to value, as one of our metrics is, the speed to value for both parties is met through the methodology.
And I wanted to bring you in, Matthias, here, because I'm wondering, in terms of what does success look like, then there's quite an interesting thing there. Success could be failure, quick failure in terms of the learning. But, do you at DPW have some sort of defined KPIs and metrics that you use to define success for these types of garage projects?
I think, maybe Nefrit is probably a better position to talk about those KPIs, or maybe Herman that we brought into the garage, right? Mm-hmm. But I guess, I think if you think about digital and the new mindsets and behaviors that you need to apply to make it work, it's maybe a different mindset there that we typically need, right? So digital is not an A to B linear SAP implementation, right? So it's and that's what also we tried with the procurement garage, I guess, to bring a bit of a testing and learning mindset into that company, where I guess failure is okay and failing is okay. And I think it's okay to fail on a 5 million SAP implementation, but a lot of these solutions are more cost effective, right? And maybe the failing there is okay. But maybe Herman, or Nefrit, in terms of those KPIs, what success looks like, I guess it's probably the speed to prove the value of the solution, right? It's getting feedback from the stakeholders on progress, but maybe you guys can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, Nefrit, you come back in then and tell us about what you've experienced.
Sure. So what we measured, I'll go to one of the examples that we did around category strategy digitization. The areas that we measured was time to complete a task, because currently we don't have a digital solution to manage our category strategies. So on average, it takes our strategy managers a few weeks in order for them to develop it, go through the cycles that they need to do. So we use that as a baseline of what the current state was. And then based off of the solution that we were piloting it against, we wanted to see how much time was reduced. So that became one of the key pillars of that we were measuring as part of the pilot. In addition to that, we also, to Matthias's point earlier, we also want to make sure there's a cultural fit between us and the companies that we're working with, right? Because things are going to come up. Everybody knows how it is when there's a new release that comes and people don't understand, and we need to, connect with the supplier that we're working with. We want to make sure that there's a cohesive, bidirectional, positive experience working with them, and that it's not contentious every time, we're asking either to improve capabilities or we're making suggestions. Like, we definitely want to make sure that it's more of a partnership. And then in terms of speed to value, based off of the results that we determined from the proof point around time reduction, as an example, what does that mean in the broader scheme of savings that we can deliver to J&J? If you multiply the savings that we identified in the 100 days, maximize to the number of category managers that currently are, working in this mode. So when you kind of have it very detailed and succinct on the areas that you're focused to test, then you're able to really hone in on what you were able to prove out, the relationship between us and the supplier that we're working with, and what the future potential of savings could be. And that can, those criteria in this example is what we use to make a recommendation on whether or not we wanted to move forward with the company that we were piloting with.
Okay, well, I think that's all we've got time for, which is I'd love to go on for a lot longer. We'll have to have you back on the session. So it really does remain for me to say thank you very much to you all for your contributions today. And actually this idea that, being a bit more nimble, being more speedy, thinking about that 100-day segment really starts to reinvent us from that, what is it they say, that the roadblock to the nitrous fuel in the business, which is what we all want procurement to be. So thank you very much to Matthias Gutzmann, to Nufrid Pierre-Louis, and to Herman Knievel for coming and joining me today. The next session, stay here for the next session. It's here in this feed. It's cloudy with a chance of cyber risk. Now, I had an email through in my box to tell me that one of the providers that I work with has been hacked and leaked my personal data because of the cyber risk. So it's real and it's happening every day. So it's a session that not only us personally have to deal with, but as procurement people, we need to know all about. So hop on over to the next session, stay here and join Phil Eidson when he's joined by Joe Peterson for our next session. And thank you again to our guests for joining me here for this session today.